Hello and welcome back to College Clinton and our special bonus lecture, lecture 2.5. So in our previous lecture we went over supply and demand, which is a huge topic and very important. So I didn't want to trouble you or trouble our minds with anything extra on top of that. So we'll just let that sit. But now I think our topic for today is marginal cost and marginal utility, which I think feeds into supply and demand. So I think it's an important thing that we cover. So we're going to do it with us in this special bonus 2.5 lecture. So as I said, we're just going to cover marginal utility or benefit, same thing really, and marginal cost and what they mean in regards to supply and demand. So let's start with marginal utility. So we've got a lovely textbook definition here. Marginal utility is the added satisfaction that a consumer gets from having one more unit of a good or service. So to make that clear, as opposed to total benefit, which say we have our all the items that we buy and add up all the utility. Marginal utility looks at each individual next purchase, each individual next item. So to make that really clear, I'll tell you about a dessert or a treat, a chocolate biscuit that we have in Australia called Tim Tams. I really love Tim Tams. I'm normally pretty good with chocolate and whatnot, but when it comes to like Tim Tams, I have no self-control. When I buy a packet of Tim Tams, if there's 10 Tim Tams, I'm eating all of them. Okay, I will literally eat all of them. I'm not going to stop at 1, 2, 3, or 5, or 6, or 7. I'm going to eat all of them until there's none left. Now, despite that, you might be thinking, well, man, you must love Tim Tams, and I do, right? The important thing to realize is, even though the total utility is really high in total, there's actually diminishing marginal utility from each chocolate biscuit, from each Tim Tam, even though I love them all so much, okay? And I'll make that clear to you. So when I first eat the first Tim Tam, because I don't eat them very often because I know I have no self-control, the first one is the best. The first Tim Tam that I eat tastes the best, and that gives me the most satisfaction. The second one, it's close to it because I'm just like, hell yeah, this Tim Tam is amazing. The second one is almost as good. The third one, a little bit less. It's still really good. And the fourth, a little bit less. The fifth one, I'm still really enjoying myself with the fifth one. I'm kind of feeling bad about myself for eating so many Tim Tams, but screw that. I'm going to keep going. The sixth, the seventh. By the seventh Tim Tam, at the 5-minute mark, right, I'm actually starting to feel a little bit sick, right? But I'm not going to stop. I have no self-control. So I still get utility from it. I still get a little bit of benefit from it. I ate the 8th, 9th, and the 10th Tim Tam. I'm feeling pretty sick, but I figure I really love these Tim Tams so much. The enjoyment I'm getting out of the 10th Tim Tam is even more than the dis-utility, I suppose, or the dis-benefit that I get from the sickness, okay? So here we have the law of diminishing marginal utility, and it makes intuitive sense, right? Your first slice of pizza is the best tasting, right? You really want that slice of pizza. You're really hungry. You eat that slice of pizza. It's the best one. The second one's probably still pretty good, but the first one's the best. So that's our law of diminishing marginal utility. Anytime we have more of something, the more and more of something, we end up not knowing what to do with it. Our utility, becomes much reduced. So marginal utility is important. For one, total utility is difficult to measure, but more specific to that, many of our decisions are made at the margins, right? We come out of high school, for example, and we're thinking, well, how many more years do I want to study of higher education? Well, it's an important question to make. Will the next year of higher education if I do postgraduate, how much benefit am I going to get out of that versus the costs? And already, if you've been remembering some of our previous lectures, we've acknowledged that there's an opportunity cost to that, right? So a lot of our decisions are made at the margins, and it's important, and it has many economic implications for decision making. So just a really obvious example, let's go over Tim Tams again. This is obviously, we've got here a table of Tim Tams, marginal utility, and total utility. Now, this isn't my utility, because obviously my utility would be 1,000 for the first Tim Tam, not 100, okay? And it's worth keeping and noting this, understanding that this marginal utility, quote unquote, right, this units, we can think about it as units of utility or units of satisfaction, units of benefit. It's very ethereal, I guess, but it's the best we've got. And this is always a problem with measuring benefit sometimes that isn't in a dollar form. It's difficult. So we're just going to use this idea of a unit of utility. So this person have the first Tim Tam. Their marginal utility for that, the units of utility is 100, right? It's 100 benefit that they get from that Tim Tam. So that means the total benefit so far is 100. Now the second Tim Tam is a little bit less than that, still really high, they're at 90. And their total utility then is 190. But their marginal utility for that second Tim Tam is just 90. And the Tim Tam after that is 50 marginal utility, and that means the total utility is 240, so much reduced marginal utility. And the one after that, 20 and 10 and 5, and then the seventh Tim Tam, is 0. Like, they don't even eat that. Like, they should give it to me, right? They should give that Tim Tam to me, but they just they throw it out. They get no additional utility from that, so total utility stays the same at 275. So that makes sense, okay? And we have our graph of marginal utility here. So the first Tim Tam, we have a look over here. Our first Tim Tam, high marginal utility. Second Tim Tam, still pretty high. Our third, there's a big drop off, and then successive drop offs, right? And when you look at total utility, you can see the same, an intuitive what you would expect to see. Our first Tim Tam, we get a big increase in utility. Our second Tim Tam, we get a big increase in utility. And the third one, not so much. The fourth one, yeah, we're really starting, not really. And then really flattens off until we're just getting no higher on this utility. We're not making any more utility. So, I mean, just in an obvious sense, why does this matter? I mean, well, you're not going to keep choosing to eat Tim Tams when you're up to like 6, right? You probably, or even maybe 4. You're not just going to keep eating Tim Tams when you can eat something else, maybe some fruit, right? That'll give you some higher utility, right? That makes no sense. So this is in a simple sense, we're always constantly, as the same with opportunity cost, we're constantly making decisions based upon marginal utility all the time. And these obviously have, in the case of Tim Tams, small ramifications, but in the case of things like education, how many years of study, these have big implications. So, marginal benefit, some of the implications that I want for you to consider linking into supply and demand. Maybe you've already thought about this. The consumer will buy one more unit of a good or service if its price is less than or equal to the value the consumer places on it. Okay? And this is including, obviously, opportunity cost. As such, the demand curve is actually a marginal benefit curve, right? Remembering our previous lecture. So, before we show you the graph, maybe some of you are a bit confused, saying, what are you talking about? The demand curve is the margin, what? Well, just remember, let's say you don't buy things, if your benefit of your getting of something is, $10, and the price is $11, well, you won't buy that, will you? You're not going to buy that. But if the price is $9 and the benefit you're getting is $10, well, then you will naturally, rational self-interest, you will buy it. Now that's starting to sound very much like a downward sloping demand curve, isn't it? All right, so let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at the demand curve. So the demand curve shows us two things: the quantity demanded at each price, other things remaining the same. And we've got our nice little graph here. We understand that from our previous lecture. So at $10, quantity demanded of the quantity of pizzas in this example demanded at $10 is 10,000 pizzas. The market demands 10,000 pizzas when the price is $10. But the demand curve also shows us something else: the maximum price willingly paid for the last pizza available. So think about this. Think about the implications over here. So the maximum price willingly paid for that 10,000th pizza. That last customer that bought that pizza, okay, that person, he or she, it's at that, the benefit they're getting is at that price, $10. That's the last person in the market that it makes sense for. All the other people in this market, all the other customers for pizza, they say, the benefit I get from that pizza, from buying it from a pizza, is less than $10. And so it doesn't make sense for them to buy it. And that's why we stop here on the demand curve, right? Now hopefully it's making a lot of intuitive sense, okay? And all these other people, okay, all the people that bought the pizza, the benefit they're getting exceeds $10. All those 10,000 people that went out and bought a pizza at a price point at $10, I mean, the benefit must exceed it because we're rational, all right? We're not going to make bad trades, as we previously discussed. So that last pizza, we know, there's no one else in this market that's willing to spend $10 on a pizza. All that value, is being captured with that price, at that price point. It's been captured. So we can see there from that, therefore, the demand curve actually equals the marginal benefit curve. And that's really cool. So let's jump onto marginal cost now. So on the other side, very simple. Marginal cost is we're looking at it from the supplier's point of view now. Marginal cost is the change in total cost as a result of a 1 unit change in output. So let's just look at a marginal cost table here. So we've got a firm, and we'll just use output one, very simple, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, total cost here is 1,000 at 0 output. And you might be thinking, we're not making anything. How is it that there's costs? Well, there is such a thing, and I just want to introduce it to you now, but we'll talk about it much later on, of fixed costs. Think about like a factory. Even if you're not making anything in the factory, even if there's no employees there, it still costs you to build the factory, or you have to rent out the premises. There's still such things as fixed costs. It doesn't matter how much you produce or how little you produce, you still have to pay it. So at 0 output, we still have 1,000 total costs. Now, at 1 unit of output, our total costs are now 1,400. That means our marginal cost is 400. Now, to go from 1 unit to the second unit, our total costs increased to 1,600. And so that means we know our marginal costs, the marginal cost of them going from 1 unit to 2 units is 200. And here from the second to the third unit, our total cost increases to $1,750. It means we know the marginal cost of going from that second to third unit is $150. And it stays the same at $1,900. So we can see when our fourth unit, it's 100, marginal cost is 150. So we can see here we're getting return to scale. And again, you probably intuitively understand that, but we'll get into returns to scale much later on. But that, just for now, just think about our marginal cost. So what are the implications of this? Okay, the seller will produce 1 more unit of a good or service if the price for which it can be sold exceeds or equals the marginal cost. Well, that makes perfect sense, but what does that mean? It means the supply curve is a marginal cost curve. And just think about it. Think about a supplier. If you can sell something, think back to the slice of pizza. We sell a slice of pizza for $10, right? And the costs are for $3. Well, we're definitely going to sell that pizza. And the fourth pizza, the next pizza, the cost is $6. We'll still sell that one because we're selling it for $10. And the next pizza is like, $7 and $8 and $9 costs. Well, it still makes sense up until that that final pizza is $10. And let's have a look at the graph here. So the supply curve shows us 2 things: the quantity supplied at each price, we understand that. Other things remaining the same. So over here, so let's look at here at the price of $10. We supply 10,000 pizzas. Quantity of pizza supplied at $10 a pizza, 10,000. But it also shows us the minimum price that firms must be offered to supply a given quantity of pizza. So, to supply 10,000 pizzas, we need to sell them we need the price to be $10. So just think about this final pizza. The final pizza sold, the 10,000th pizza, okay? The cost to the suppliers to make that last pizza was $10. And the price they get for it is $10. And all the previous pizzas, they were made, the price that it cost them to make that pizza was less than the price that they were selling the pizza for. And so it makes sense. It makes sense that you'll sell all the way up to that 10,000 pizzas. But you won't, when the price is 10, you won't sell another pizza, right? Because the marginal benefit, in this case, the supplier is getting, is less than the marginal cost to the supplier. So in that sense, now that we understand that, we can see that the supply curve is also the marginal cost curve. Really cool. So what happens when marginal benefit equals marginal cost? Well, that's the equilibrium price. Remember, when all the forces of supply and demand are in equilibrium, resources are used efficiently. The equilibrium quantity is the quantity that people value most highly. To produce more of one good, some of another good that is valued more highly must be given up. Remember opportunity cost. To produce less of one good, more of another good that is not valued as highly as the one foregone will be produced. So just simply, if that's confusing you, remember our coffee example from last week. In this example, let's just be honest, straight up about it. We've got a farmer here in Colombia, okay? And he has his crops, and some of the crops are really good for coffee, and some of the crops is really good for cocaine. And think about if the price of coffee is really low, well, he's only going to use the really, really good land for coffee. And that means less coffee and more cocaine. And when the price of coffee is really high, he's going to use even more land for even some of the land that's not so good for coffee. For coffee, to use it for coffee. And that means there'll be more coffee and less cocaine. And these forces can work, either way. But it makes perfect sense if we go back to the supply. We're not going to be making a pizza or, in this case, or a coffee, any more coffee than the marginal benefit we get. So we're not going to make our 10,000th and one coffee beans or pizza, right? When the price is only $10 in this case. It's just logical. And so this is how our markets are efficient. We're not wasting anything, or there's no waste here in this perfect example we've got here, okay? Where all our forces are equilibrium and our marginal benefit equals the marginal cost for both the supplier and the producer. So this is a really cool graphic I found online that I think explains it. So let's look at this from the perspective of the consumer, right? This is our price equilibrium. If we're not going to stop. Let's say the first consumer buys this quantity, low quantity. Well, consumers aren't going to stop, right? Because they can still get benefit, right? It makes sense. The marginal benefit, there's still more marginal benefit to be made because there's much more willingness to buy because the price is so low in comparison to up here. So when the PE is here, marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost. So we move ahead, we keep buying more, until marginal benefit equals marginal cost. And the same on the supplier. When we're selling the good for up here, okay, well, we're not going to produce this much, are we? Down here, okay, marginal benefit for the supplier is still higher than marginal costs. Okay, we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep producing more units until we get up here, until that final item equals marginal cost. And we stop. We're not going to keep going, are we? We're not going to keep going and producing more units because then marginal cost would exceed the marginal benefit. So we don't make those units. We don't make those units at all. So we're not inefficiently producing. And that's the same over here. If a consumer was to buy, the consumers were to buy more, okay, they would need a lower price. It doesn't make sense. Out here, marginal cost is higher for them. Why would they buy more? Why would they buy a single item more than they should? There's no benefit to them. Marginal cost down here, when the price is up here, exceeds marginal benefit. So if they were to purchase this much, they need the price to be much lower, and that makes sense. So when marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, move ahead. When marginal cost is greater than marginal benefit, scale back. And that works the same way for the producer and the consumer. Produce more, consume more. Produce less, consume less. It makes perfect sense. So, marginal benefit equaling marginal cost. Let's sum that up. In a competitive market, the demand curve shows buyer's marginal benefit. The supply curve shows the seller's marginal cost. At the equilibrium in a competitive market, marginal benefit equals marginal cost. Resources are used efficiently. So that should give you some extra understanding of what goes into our demand and supply curves, and this will be very useful for when we're doing graphs later on, and our understanding of things like monopolies later on. So that's it. Nice short lecture. I just wanted to introduce marginal cost and marginal utility for you. So that's our end of week 2.5 lecture. And a nice quote here. So if you'd like to know more, so please subscribe or link this to someone else who you think might help them. That would really help me out. So thanks very much, guys. Good luck out there. And the final slide will have a nice cat gif, and we'll also have my email if you'd like to send me any questions. All right, thanks, guys. Good luck.